John Humphreys, the presenter of BBC Radio 4's Today programme. He put a few noses out of joint this week when he described the Thought for the Day slot as deeply, deeply boring. He went on to say that it seems to me inappropriate that Today should broadcast nearly 3 minutes of uninterrupted religion, given that rather more than half our population have no religion at all. And Michael, if half of the UK don't consider themselves religious, that means maybe half do. And does religion still deserve a place on the schedule, just like any other topic, whether it's football, politics, economics, whatever?
Well, certainly religious people do. And the thing that I would object to about the Thought for Today slot is that it doesn't allow atheists or agnostics to contribute to it. And I think a general rule of thumb for things like this is, if you reverse it round, if you imagine that BBC had a slot from which religious people were banned, everybody would immediately realise that that was inappropriate. And I think it's a kind of staggeringly arrogant brand grab to associate the phrase Thought of Today exclusively with religion. Because I think the consensus among reasonable people has long moved on this issue, that what used to be referred to as freedom of religion is now referred to as freedom of religion or belief, and the belief part refers to non-religious philosophical beliefs, and that the right to hold both should be treated with equal respect.
Well, that's what Giles Fraser wrote in his article, or at least referred to, Michael, when he said that the vast majority of people on this planet believe in some sort of God, and that the major faiths and the smaller ones have shaped world history, ethics, politics, culture like no other force known to humankind. And for good or for ill, people still live and die for their faiths. And you cannot understand the world unless you understand something about the way that faith functions in the lives of those who believe in it. Do you accept that?
Well, firstly, I think Giles tries to want to have it both ways. I mean, his article is criticising people for making fun of religion, but in that very article he makes fun of atheists, and he seems to think it's okay for him to do what he's criticising others for doing. But on the broader picture, personally, I think that religion corrupts ethics. I think that ethics is an evolved attribute based on compassion and empathy and fairness and reciprocity and justice, and that what religion does is, first of all, it relies on faith, which is an unreliable way of understanding reality and morality, and secondly, it introduces supposedly supernatural commands that often contravene what we would see as being ethical.
But do you accept that the world's great religions, as they're called, that they shaped the world as we know it today?
Yes, and I think more for ill than for good in terms of ethics. But I completely respect their right to believe what they want to believe, as long as they're not interfering in the rights of others. And I think that the key issue is to respect the right of everybody to believe what they believe, but for the state to remain neutral. Atheist Ireland has an alliance in the Republic of Ireland with the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and the Evangelical Alliance of Ireland, whereby we respect that we each have very different fundamental worldviews, but we work together on human rights issues and on challenging discrimination against religious people and atheists alike. And the key is respecting our rights within society to believe what we want, but the state, and by implication the BBC as an institution of state, remaining neutral on these issues. If
more and more people are believing in atheism, becoming atheists, is that not in effect a religion itself too now?
No, it's not. And I think the key difference is that atheism doesn't rely on faith. And by faith, I mean believing things disproportionately to the currently best available evidence. And that I think is the problem, because it results in different people coming to different beliefs about the same reality. Whereas applying reason to evidence, which is typically the route by which people arrive at atheism, it more reliably, not exclusively, but more reliably results in different people coming to the same beliefs about the same reality through, for example, the scientific method.
Steve, Michael there said he believes that religion corrupts ethics. What do you say to that?
I'm sure Michael and I could have a good debate about that, but it seems to me, don't kill, don't steal, don't covet your neighbour's spouse. These are things that nobody's going to disagree with. So I think, though we might disagree with some of the ethics that comes out for whatever reason, I think it's a broad sweeping generalisation. He talked about lots there about compassion and various other things, and Jesus was very much into compassion and justice and all these things. So and I think that's one of the things we have to be careful of. There's very different views of atheists have very different views, and Christians have very different views, and Jews have very different views, and so it can be very lazy at times if we just put something into a package and say that's religion's bad for ethics. I mean, really, I think that's a bit of a broad sweep. But we have things to confess as well and things to repent of in the past. But I still think we have something very strong to contribute into the society that we live in. And I would say that I have to say you can't really. Atheism is a worldview. Christianity is a worldview, and nothing's neutral, and we're really in danger if we think that the BBC would be neutral if they took off Thought for the Day.
Linda, how do you make religion relevant in today's increasingly secular society? I mean, that's our question this morning. How do you do it?
I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding here. A minority of people in this country are religious in the old sense, and a minority are atheists. Most people are somewhere in the middle, and they say they have no religion. They're agnostic. They're not certain if there's a God. They mix and match lots of different religious beliefs. They're independently minded. They're thinking, my students, they think incredibly critically about these issues, about their values, about religion and atheism, and they want more serious, critical, engaged debate from the position of where people are rather than where they were yesterday. And I think that's the big challenge in society now. What should we do in school assemblies? I often think of Thought for the Day as our kind of national school assembly. And we are having those debates about what are British values and how do we behave in a multicultural society. And broadcasting needs to be reflective of that much wider and much more engaged debate, which is where most people are now.
So it's wider, is it, Linda, than simply wondering how many people go to church on a Sunday?
It's absolutely wider. So old-style religion, which is defined around what church belonging to the church used to be, and atheism, which was defined in opposition to it, those are both under challenge at the moment. And most people, as I say, are somewhere in the middle, more exploratory, more open, and kind of metaphysically modest. They don't think that they have got all the answers, and they see that whether they're on the atheist side or the more religious side, there is faith involved. We don't actually know what most of the universe is like. That's what the scientists tell us. And to think we can be certain about these things isn't what most people now believe.
And Linda, why is atheism under challenge?
Organised atheism is under challenge because it historically is set up in opposition to organised religion, and that's declining. Both things are declining in terms of membership of secular societies and certain secularism, because we're now much more aware, I think, that our human brains are rather limited, and our cognitive apparatus is limited, and we have to be modest about those claims we make, and we have to interrogate and be critical about what we believe and how we behave and what our values are, and not treat them as absolutes that we can be completely certain about.
So, Michael, given that, I'm wondering, is there a space then, an opportunity for atheists and religious to work together almost, to find a new way to deliver a new thing that the people Linda's talking about are desperately seeking?
Well, that's what we do in Atheist Ireland, and we don't claim to be certain. Indeed, it's religious people typically who claim to be certain because they believe that the creator of the universe is telling them things. Everything that Linda just said is what my philosophy is. I believe strongly that the evidence that humans invented the idea of gods is far stronger than the evidence that gods exist, but I would never claim to be certain. And I think that you can be both an atheist if you don't believe in God and also an agnostic, because agnosticism is about claims of knowledge. It's not about what you claim to believe. But I do want to go back briefly to the point about why I think religion corrupts ethics and the examples that were given there about thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's wife. The reason that the Bible says you don't covet your neighbour's wife is that the wife is the property of the husband. And in terms of Jesus, Jesus said that he would kill the children of Jezebel for the sins of their mother. So that's exactly what I mean by that. In order to say that religion is a force for good, you have to cherry pick the bits that are consistent with natural morality.
Jonathan, what's your view?
Well, I think we're in a curious position in that a lot of people, as Linda said, have religious questions. You know, who are we, where are we going, what's the point of it all? And yet they don't really go to church or synagogue or other institutions because they've got a problem with doctrine. And they're really not sure if they believe in the Trinity or the idea of God becoming man and then dying on the cross. And it's almost as if they want to believe but can't. And maybe the religion has to sort of change horses slightly, a bit like a stagecoach with 4 horses, and the lead weeds being the doctrine, but now we need to change on some of the strengths that the religion has, which have been, it's an enormous force for good in terms of social action, whether it's for the homeless or for drug addicts or for food banks. It offers camaraderie, it offers fellowship, it offers community, and those are the real strengths of religion. And I think that's what people admire about it, but they're put off by the Sunday services. And somehow we've got to harness the really, really good things the religion or organised religion can offer in a world which has sort of almost outgrown some of the mythology of the past.
Steve, do you agree? I mean, it strikes me listening to that there is a real opportunity for religion and for clergy and for the churches to have a real role in giving people, in filling that hole in people's lives that they feel that they need something, but that the churches perhaps don't know how to.
I think there's some truth in that. I'm off to do a church service that we've just been saying here is a bit irrelevant. And I do think we have to change how we do things. We've moved into, if you like, we've moved into a whole different world where the things we breathe are different. And the church has to respond to that. We have to hold to the belief in God that we have and the belief in, from a Christian church point of view that I'm from, the Jesus that we believe in. But we've got to find other ways to contribute into the society that we contribute into. And Thought for the Day is not one of them. And actually, we're limited what we can say in Thought for the Day, so don't blame sometimes the speakers in Thought for the Day for just being nice, but I think we have to find ways to contribute into society, and I think what the rabbis just said, I go all around the world, and the things that people who believe in Jesus are doing because they believe in Jesus, I think far outweighs some of the stuff that we've got wrong in recent years, and we're doing all kinds of things across the world that I'm very proud to call myself a Christian and be involved in.
Linda, how would you do it then? I mean, Jonathan talks about the doctrine, but isn't religion all about doctrine and living life through the doctrine and through what's said in the Bible and so on?
I just don't think the evidence supports this view that people have a gap, that they're looking for something, that they wish they had the old style religion. Actually, people are making all sorts of new rituals. Non-religious funerals are now more popular than religious funerals, and people are doing it for themselves. Belief in a soul has been rising. Belief in an afterlife has been rising. But people have their own new beliefs about that. So I think we're seeing a really creative reconstruction and reimagination going on at the moment, which we haven't caught up with intellectually. Our media hasn't caught up with it yet, but it's happening there. And when you go out and talk to people, they're full of ideas and thoughts, and as I say, new sorts of rituals that they're inventing. So I just don't see this vacuum and gap. I see a really new and interesting change taking place. OK,
so where then do the churches as we know them now fit into that?
It depends whether and how they engage with that, and some do. There's a huge variety in church, but I don't think they're going to get anywhere by thinking there's a gap for a certain sort of product which people don't want any longer.
Jonathan?
Well, I'm not entirely sure about that. I mean, for me, what I find people are really, really into is community and social action. And this is where churches have really got an opportunity, because local pubs, local villages, post offices and village halls are all closing. The church is there, and it can be that focus for community.
But Jonathan, if they wanted community, they'd be going to church.
No, but because they can't actually believe what's being said or preached. And they actually find that the words of the prayer book don't actually speak to them, because they're not into the Trinity and the Incarnation and the resurrection. But they do want to be good and be nice and be happy. And there's a lovely saying, that to be a good Jew, you don't have to believe in God. You just have to do what he says. And in many ways, it's the getting on with it, the living, the interacting with other people, to making your way in the world that I think people need a sense of community and structure for.
Michael, so listening there to what Linda said and Jonathan and so on, is there room for church in this new way that people live their lives and do things themselves? Would you welcome something like that, or is it your view that the churches just need to die, essentially?
Well, I think the world is becoming more secular. Not I think, I mean, the World Values Survey shows that in general societies are becoming more secular, and that the reason is that people are moving away from survival values and towards self-expression values at different paces in different places around the world. So I think that is the way that society is moving, particularly in the developed world. But within that, I completely respect the right of anybody to believe whatever they believe about the origin of the universe or the source of their ethics, as long as they're not interfering in the human rights of others. And I think that most religious people, like most atheists, are good people just getting on with their lives. And the key, as I said at the start of the programme, is that the state doesn't take sides supporting either religion or atheism.
Steve, why does it matter? Why would it matter if the churches no longer were there to provide the role that they provide? Why would it matter if what Linda said she is chronicling is happening, that was the way it is?
Well, there's a lot of people want to go to church this morning. It's not, should we have a church and, then we have to make up a church because we should have one for a wider society. The people come to Fitzroy this morning have a dynamic faith in God. They want to follow Jesus. They want to do that in the community that they believe they should do that. So that's why we exist. How we exist then in how we react, and Jesus, Christmas is coming up, incarnation, the Word became flesh and dwelt for a while among us. And so for us, what we believe is that there is a God, and that God has something to say, and that God wants to move into the neighbourhood and do that with compassion and justice and all kinds of other things. So the church exists because there are people who want to worship God this morning.
But should it dominate in the way that it did hundreds of years ago?
I don't think at the start it did. I think that's the thing that we have to learn as a church, that we don't have, the early church didn't have the power. They were constantly under persecution and being misunderstood, and they certainly didn't have a thought for the day in the first 200 or 300 years. And I would probably suggest that actually being in the place of power has harmed us, and much of the debate today has been because we found ourselves in a place of power rather than the place we maybe should be, which is a subversive revolution happening on the edges.
Well, look, thank you all very much indeed for taking part this morning. The Reverend Steve Stockman, Rabbi Jonathan Romain, Michael Nugent from Atheist Ireland, and Professor Linda Woodhead. You've been listening to us this morning. You have your views. I'll read some of them now from your text. Dr. Peter Doran at Queen's says the God slot on Radio Ulster feeds a deep-rooted anti-intellectualism in Northern Ireland public discourse. Faith is a much wider phenomenon than holding ethical literacy hostage to a belief in a sky God. Andrew Dougal says with so many inequalities in the world, it is critical that we are reminded of the need for a moral compass. Thought for the day need not be religious, as each new day dawns. Thought for the day taxes us to question what each of us does to help others.